Hello and welcome, my friends, to the NEWSPASTE Podcast with me, your host, Johnny Vedmore. I'm here again with this is the first time that someone's come back to the podcast on the NEWSPASTE Podcast so far. At least I think so, unless I'm forgetting someone, but I'm pretty positive. This is the first time we have a returning guest, someone who I've worked with before. We wrote the non-governmental octopus together. He also helped me with the Guido Goldman and the German Marshall Fund article. Guido Goldman, the CFR, and the German Marshall Fund article. A great researcher, a Turkish fella. You can see him on screen already, smiling. You can see him smiling, Kaan. Kaan Disli, the man with the name that I wish I had. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
I'm always happy to have you, Khan. You're someone who's like me. You're interested in politics in a way that means that we could probably sit down and just go bah, 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 all night long and talk away. So I mean, I like that. I also like the fact that you come with a completely different perspective than most people, of course. So do you want to, for the people who are meeting you for the first time, do you want to explain a little bit about yourself?
For sure. I am someone that's really interested in politics. I'm a student in France, in Paris, and I'm a master's student in AI research at Sorbonne University. And I guess next to doing computer science, I'm also very interested in politics. I've been interested in politics for since I was basically 14 years old, and I feel like I've accumulated at least enough knowledge to maybe sometimes speak about it in front of other people.
Well, you do a very good job. I mean, I know that I don't want to, you know, give away your age, but you're if I was able to speak at politics at your level, when I was your age, then I would be much further along now than I am. You know, it's you're very impressive. And of course, that's not a surprise when you go to a school like the Sorbonne. So, you say what is your master's that you're studying now? You say there's relation to artificial intelligence. What are you actually studying?
Well, exactly. It is a master's, and I did my bachelor's in computer science, and my specialty in the master's program would be AI research, decision making, logical representations, and everything that relates to, you could say, data science as well. I'm just a first year student in the master's program, so I'm no expert in the subject, but hopefully one day I will become at least proficient in the field.
Not to tell on your professors on how good they are. Don't give the game away too much if it's going to get you in trouble, seeing as you're still doing the course. But what's it like studying AI? And studying, like, the ideas of it. Do they talk about the dangers much, or do they only kind of concentrate on the benefits and the possibilities?
Well, it's just a very technical program, so it doesn't really have much to do with the pros and cons. It's just you do this
Mm.
in a certain manner. This is what you need to know. This is what you need to do. There isn't really, at least I haven't taken an ethics part of this course yet.
Mm. So um do you think that's missing out of these courses, or do you think that would just be counterproductive for people who want to learn about how to program machines for machine learning, etc.? Do you think that it's just like, a case that this is just, you know, is kind of irrelevant. AI revolution is happening whether we like it or not. It's going to go in whichever direction the policymakers send it in. And do you think that you need to learn much while you're doing AI? I mean, it's not like you can do much about it. So do you feel that there should be a more ethical component to it?
Well, for sure. It mu- it's the same with any other subject. AI is a very powerful tool, and it can be used for good or bad. And learning about the history and learning about the current state of the art technology and where it's actually used, because people know that it's also used quite often in the military context. So I guess it would be quite useful to have some sort of ethical approach to this as well, because we don't know what it really is going to lead to in 5 to 10 years. And many people say what you want to say about Elon Musk, but he has also warned about the threat of really fast developing AI technology. So if someone like Elon Musk is saying it, you can't really ignore it in
Mhm.
your own course. You can't be that arrogant, I think. So it
Yeah.
would be quite useful.
I do feel that, I mean, you know what I write about Elon Musk here and there, and I'm not a biggest fan. But it does tend to be that the people who are the first to warn you nowadays are usually the ones who are creating the technology at the same time, advancing it onwards. So I mean, even though he warns about it, he's also pushing it along with seemingly without fear. And so that worries me because I do worry that I think everybody worries AI is going to be in the hands of monsters, and the representation of AI that will come out will be the projected version of the monstrous character that's wielding the technology. So how fast do you think AI is developing, and how quickly in the future do you think we'll see really, really extreme jumps in technological advancement from using AI?
I mean, this is a really tough question. I don't even think the real experts in the field know how far AI will go, but we've seen in the past couple of years, especially if ChatGPT, if you've used it, it is an incredible tool that I don't even remember how I lived before ChatGPT existed. It's
Mm.
such a useful tool, and it is quite scary because it is, in my opinion, better than most other tools, and it can perform tasks that would, if it developed even further, it could make a lot of jobs obsolete. And I don't think anyone really knows at the moment how far the AI revolution will go. But it is quite clear to me that the jobs that most people have today will definitely not be existing in 10 years. A lot of jobs will not be existing.
That's so close because 10 years goes by so quickly. I know that the one of the main, like, for me as an investigative journalist who is deep within the conspiracy realm, and looking at actual conspiracies, the one thing that worries me about ChatGPT is that it still won't discuss 9/11 or Jeffrey Epstein. So it's very much still programmed by humans, and given the boundaries of what it's allowed to explore by humans. When do you think that may change?
Never. I don't think that'll ever change. Because by the nature of these technologies, it's not a really complicated, even though it's a really special technology, it's not super complicated in the sense that it will it will just give you what you feed them, meaning that if you feed ChatGPT a lot of sources on, let's say, 9/11 or other topics that are not really controversial or that are in line with mainstream explanations, when you ask a question about it, it will recite to you back what it already knows. So it really depends on the information you're feeding it. It's not a tool that maybe some people think this way, but it's not a tool that thinks by itself. It is entirely dependent on what is being fed into it, which is which are articles written by, or like sources, books written by normal people. So I don't think, as long as these companies are in charge of these giant natural language processing models, it will never be the case that we'll get a uncensored version of this. But maybe a philanthropist would like to fund such a project where they get unbiased sources from many different places, and there's no filter on the responses.
Now that is what I think is going to come as world of fifth generation warfare increases. So I believe that there's a moment, and we're approaching that moment now. There's signs of it. Things like how the X platform has been carefully opened up and constructed to be a kind of freedom of speech platform. I say that because they say, "Oh, it's not freedom of reach," and that means that they lock you in a box if they don't like you. I think that there's a element that in the next 5 to 10 years is going to be, especially probably in the next few years, there's going to be an opening up, like flooding the zone with information instead of restricting information. What would a model like or a system like Chat GPT be like if it was not if it was given all of the information and allowed to be opened up? Do you think that it could potentially take the place of many investigative journalists if it had all of the information?
Sadly, I think yes, it could, it really could, because I mean, these AI models have such an understanding of the content they're consuming better than neither of us could really consume the entire content of the internet, but these models can, and they can make connections. Because what we try to do is we read multiple articles, we read hundreds of articles, and we try to make the connections. They can do this in under a minute. So and these are tasks we do in a month. So, but on the bright side, this is actually quite useful now that as an investigative journalist, all you have to do is find the proper sources and prompt the language model with the correct prompts, and then you get the connections you need. And this would mean that things are more in the clear, in the sense that if there's a connection between certain companies and certain illegal activities, and you happen to find articles that mention this, and you happen to feed it into the language model, you don't have to do the way we do it. You trace one person to the other person to the other person. The AI model can much more easily do this.
Yeah, yeah, that is both concerning and hope, like full of hope as well. Because I mean, I know that I use and interact with the information and the data that we gather in the world of investigative journalism in a way that suits my ability to with in relation to the technology and the advancement of the technology to gather such information and present it in a clear way. If I could gather information quicker, then I would be asking probably different questions, but still, being able to explain to people something, because I find AI is of course it's a computer, it's computer models, so they're detached from that humanity. You can feel they've taken out the humanity. So I mean that's something that humans will always be able to do better than machine, probably, is to give the human touch, though machines can eventually mimic that. I find this a very interesting. I mean, we're not even officially, we're going to be talking about foreign relations. We're going to be talking about a lot of the world politics currently as it is, especially in relation to Turkey, Russia, Israel, Iran. But starting off on a topic like AI is very relevant to that. In that sense, isn't it? It's actually relevant to everything because AI is being used on those fronts, especially when we see systems like Lavender, etc., being used in Israel. What do you think the military aspects of AI are going to mean for the future? Will humans be fighting against humans in 10 years' time?
Well, see, the way you mentioned lavender as well, that's a really, I was thinking the same thing as well. Lavender, for example, a company that will create kill lists for the Israeli government using AI and the data provided by WhatsApp. So this is really the future of AI technology that governments will make use of intelligence in cooperation with language models, with AI models, in order to process and create more valuable intelligence. And obviously, In drone warfare, AI is used. In missiles, AI can be used. So we're clearly entering an age where human to human warfare is quite diminishing. It is, well, you saw the conflict between Iran and Israel. Iran sends rockets, Israel uses planes to shoot elsewhere. So there's no even need for ground troops anymore in the sense that in a way to show deterrence to another country. Obviously, ground troops are still necessary if you want to invade and control territory. But in terms of doing damage, a world war could occur without the use of a single human. It could be or a ground troop because you can simply send ballistic missiles across the continent and it will have devastating effects.
Now, that ever-changing face of warfare, I've run it through and thought about the end point. Where does that end? Does it end in a place where one AI model built by some defense contractor or some na nation states intelligence infrastructure or military industrial complex infrastructure, does it end with those entities making the model that can break all other models and undermine every defense system in the world?
Well, I don't think it's that simple, really. It's a arms race for data processing. China, America, Israel, all these countries want to, because they have immense amount of data. That's one of the problems as well. There's a problem of differentiating between good intelligence, bad intelligence, and the intelligence that will lead you to make correct decisions. And you need to sift through all of this intelligence. And normally what has been done is by it's just officers that go through all of this data and try to evaluate how valuable they all are. But this has been it is now a lot easier with AI technology that can go through all of these datas. Now that we have simulations and war games that show, well, given this intelligence and given that we attacked a certain place, AI simulates what will the scenario look like if, for example, America and China go into war, and people say they do 10 simulations and they check, well, let's see if we win 9 out of 10 wars. So it's an arms race, and the country that has better data processing, they're gonna have better intelligence, they're gonna have better decision making. And this is the new warfare. It is about intelligence. It is not about having, obviously, it's not the 19th century anymore. It's not about having a big army. It's about precision attacks. It's about assassinating leaders. So whoever has better data processing will have an edge in this new type of warfare.
It doesn't sound like you necessarily believe that necessarily believe in artificial general intelligence. It sounds like you believe that we'll stay in I mean, it's just an assumption from what you've said so far that we'll stay in a state of artificial narrow intelligence, and we won't get to that stage where it won't be humans who, where the computers take over. Do you actually do you buy into like the Terminator or Matrix style future dystopias, or are you just do you believe that the technology and how it's used now, even if it is a little bit indistinguishable from magic eventually because it's so advanced, will always stay in the control of humans?
Well, I honestly don't really see the Terminator scenario in a. I don't think it's very likely because the way unless I think the Terminator scenario benefits from the fact that there is a almost a veil between how AI works and the output AI provides. And it seems like it's doing magic, but it's really not. And the only way such a scenario where artificial intelligence could be a threat to humans is almost entirely when humans use it against other humans. It's not that it's gonna make autonomous decisions. It's more like what will happen. A scenario where AI is, I guess, taking over would be if a bad coder made sure that, for example, I don't know, the missile system, the nuclear codes are somehow dependent on an American AI program, and they forget to monitor it in some manner where AI makes a decision by itself. But it's not, you could say AI is making a decision, but it's only because I guess metaphorically the programmers forgot to press on the power off button. That's the only way. It would be an accident, I think. So in my opinion, it's not really a realistic scenario. But we'll see if there's something that I don't know. I'm willing to admit I'm wrong. But in my opinion, even as advanced as it is now, I don't think it's anything close to what people refer to as general artificial intelligence.
Well, I mean, the powers that be, because we were talking about the big wealthy man above it all, Elon Musk, a little bit earlier, and he's someone who claims that this is going to come at some point. The the other people like Kissinger and Schmidt also posited that AI was going to be something that we will not understand why we should do the things it's telling us. It's almost like a transhuman god created by humans, and I like the idea that that isn't going to be a possibility of the future. But really, is AI potentially a way that we are going to be tricked into thinking that we're in the Matrix or Terminator, like Schmidt or Kissinger kind of insinuated, and in actual fact, it'll be humans behind it the whole time?
Well, that's a more likely scenario. For example, off the top of my head, a scenario that I can think of is let's say we have AI that's people are thinking using AI to improve the economy as well, but let's say that there's this central AI that is being used to optimize resource allocation, or you could say military conflict, and that we defer to this AI in a lot of scenarios. And people may think that whatever the AI is saying is the optimal solution or that it is the correct decision to do. So if someone in closed doors is tinkering with the parameters, and it so happens that it outputs something that they want instead of what is optimal, people will believe it quite easily, and therefore uh, the scenario you're talking about would happen in this manner, I think.
Yeah, it actually made me shudder. Just the one part when you said, then it sent a shudder through me. Just the idea of the moment where a human is the one who's in charge of it, and that is always, always rings in my mind because I'm very much. I believe it's best that we keep humanity human, and we don't have so much, technology taking over, because I believe that humans will automatically want to implant technology inside them and become something else, and that leads us to such big catastrophic questions. They're the worst type of scenarios that will come from such things, because humans do stupid things all the time. But it's always interesting how it's like, I noticed this when I was studying Herman Kahn as well, and his warnings are not really about computers, even though he understands technology. It's about how humans might not be advanced enough mentally, spiritually, ethically, and morally to be able to adapt to the advanced technological systems that we are in control of. And so that sounds a lot like what you're saying there, that if there's going to be any issue with AI, it's probably going to be humans who don't press the button or do press the button inappropriately. And that's probably no different than it is now in that sense.
For sure.
Yeah. So let's get on to some, because I mean, the world is in turmoil. This the world is things are going. It's heating up. The kitchen is almost on fire. We've got in the past week, especially, America has sent those missiles that could have nuclear warheads put in them that are hyper ballistic missiles that can attack inside Russia to a range that causes massive issues, and it has been a red line that Putin drew, and then Putin's come back and said a lot of stuff. What is your take on what's currently going on? Are we heading towards World War III, or is it and what type of conflict would that be, or is it all still just standoff?
I mean, since the beginning of the war, the tensions have always been high, but we could say it's the highest that it's ever been probably at this moment. The fact that the use of missiles were approved for Ukraine to use against Russia, and Russia had retaliated with intercontinental ballistic missiles as well. This is and Russia considers Ukraine to be a part, almost effectively a part of NATO, because Ukraine does not have the proper integration for the missiles to launch it against Russia. They could only do so if it was integrated into a NATO apparatus. So if Ukraine is using missiles using the NATO apparatus, Russia is effectively fighting against NATO. This would mean that Poland and every other country that borders Russia would also be a viable threat to Russia. This is how you get into World War. And every time we say, now we're close to World War, now we're close to World War, and it is quite escalating. So th that, especially, that is a way we could enter into World War. But at the same time, in the Middle East, there's a similar problem as well.
Is it?
The
Yeah, go on.
Well, the conflict between Iran and Israel, it seems like that people thought that would lead us to World War. And I don't like the fact that we're increasing our chances on both sides. So yeah,
I'm thinking about that doomsday clock, the doomsday clock, a minute to
yeah.
midnight or whatever, back ages ago. And I think they were just like, that's a real projection of humanity's fear of World War, that we were a minute to midnight, where in actual fact, back then we were probably half an hour till midnight, and now we're getting closer and closer, and we're like, we've never been so close. And every time we say we've never been so close, and we've never been so close, and we just keep getting closer and closer, which if you read into may mean that we're about to go into World War III. But we've
Well,
had go on.
people say nothing ever happens, but it seems like nothing ever happens until a lot of things happen in a very short amount of time. So I wouldn't trust the fact that we say every time it's going to be a World War III and it doesn't happen. That's not a good sign. It means we're getting closer and closer.
Yeah, most definitely. I think we are getting less, we're getting less afraid, we're getting used to this idea that world war is just there. And it's almost like, I remember doing lots of research in the Black Hand series and coming across this one sentence where they were talking about a Russian spy was talking about why he was exchanging information in the nightclubs of London, and saying that, the idea was the world could end not just tomorrow, but right now. It's we're right on the press, and that feeling kind of propelled humanity's actions on for so long. And maybe the more we get used to being closer to it, the further it gets away to an extent. It's very interesting the advances, how the situation has advanced, especially the timing. Of course, Joe Biden, we all know he's not coherent making decisions like this. It's not him making the decisions. So this is just before the Trump Trump presidency starts, and it feels like they're setting up for Trump to be trapped into certain conflicts and to continue a conflict in with Russia, even if by conduit of NATO. So the question I have is, is that a fair assessment? Do you think that the ground is being laid for a much bigger conflict that is Trump is forced into when he comes into power?
Well, for sure, and I think say what you want about Biden, but in my opinion, he is really not content with what Netanyahu is doing in the Middle East, and he has expressed his distaste many times. And it was just, I think it was last month, an article came out in Politico that explained how the Biden administration really did not approve of the invasion of Lebanon by Israeli forces, but it was Amos Hochstein and Brett McGurk, two individuals in the White House. One of them, Hochstein, is the advisor. They went ahead and gave the green light to Netanyahu to do the invasion. And this does indicate a separation within the White House. So even if the president, we clearly see that even if the president does not approve of something, does not want the invasion to happen, the deep state characters that characterize the deep bureaucracy, you could say, it doesn't matter who gets elected. They're the ones that are actually making the decision, the permanent bureaucratic class. So Biden or Trump, he is being led into a world war by these deep state characters.
So I mean, personally, because I mean, for people at home, like, I just want to say your ability, your research, from my own experience, your research is well beyond your years, and your knowledge of this is seems to be like something you really enjoy. You thrive on looking through the political situations and going from one step. And like I say, research wise, you're epic to work with because you find
Well,
the
thank you.
things. It's awesome. You find the things that are just honestly astonishing. I remember when I was reading the policy document when we were writing a non-governmental octopus, and it was that policy document where it said there were 30,000 Western NGOs working in I think it was partly funded by the German Marshall Fund as well.
Yes.
And another organization I fail to remember. But that was just, that's a moment where you go, wow, there is the conspiracy. There is the proof of it in their own words. I always like it within their own words, and that's why it's really important to look at what they're saying, and you do that. And a lot of people don't. A lot of people ignore the other side, ignore what they're saying, make their assumptions, and look at what they can do in return. So I appreciate that. Do you believe that you're living in a time where we are approaching World War III right now? Then let's get to the nub of it.
Yes, for sure. I don't think in the past, I guess 30, 40 years, maybe longer, since probably the Cuban Missile Crisis. I don't think there's ever been a time where we've, we're approaching a world war on two sides, on two fronts. So yeah, I do think that.
And what's that like? Where to being a young man who's just doing his masters in the Sorbonne and is about to go out into the world? How does it feel to know? Do you think that offers you, and this is an interesting question, in this modern world, do you think that offers you more opportunity or less opportunity?
That's a great question. Uh, Although war leads to destruction, it also means a lot of people get to take advantage of the situation and make themselves more apparent. So I guess you need to make, as people say, you need to take advantage of a crisis. And people will do it, politicians will do it, and I guess I'll try to as well. Why not?
Yeah, no, no. The fact is that it's like I go into I don't I hate the technocracy. I argue against the technocracy. I find technocratic solutions to everything just thrown on it, willy-nilly, we would say in the UK, just forced upon us. I find that awful. It makes me really angry. And it makes me want to become like, a Unabomber character where I retract into a shed in the woods and I don't have communication with anybody. And you know where that leads. I mean, we all know where that leads.
Yes.
That leads to dangerous places. But in actual fact, it's not reality. However much I don't like it, QR codes are going to be used to order at tables in the near future. Technology is going to offer solutions that the humanity, culture, and society will adopt, whether I personally like it or not. So we are heading towards this element, and I have this feeling that I'm betraying humanity when I use a QR code on the table.
Yes.
Do you understand that? Do you get that?
Yeah, for sure. I remember when we were using vaccine passports in France, where you had to, in order to order a pizza, you had to show your phone that confirms
Sacre
that.
bleu.
Yeah, so these were not good times, and that's just the beginning. That was when 2021. That was 3 years ago.
Mhm.
Imagine what's gonna happen in 5 years. So yeah, we are approaching a time where the digital will become reality.
Yeah, and for me, like that my time in Chile, when I got over there, it was before the pandemics had started and the lockdowns had started in the West. But in Chile, I arrived just as lockdown began, just like it was crazy. There was roadblocks. I was ill coming off the plane, and we were in a van going back, and there was roadblocks, and they were stopping every fourth car to test them with the little meter to see if they needed to be forced quarantined. Every single restaurant adopted QR codes nearly overnight. It was like it was lockstep. Everybody was doing it together, and there was no other option. You could no longer, everybody was in a face mask. Babies were in a face mask.
Yes.
That world, which can go from one paradigm to another in a matter of a week or so, can only be made possible through technological solutions. So we know there's a sharp end to the stick and there's a blunt end, and the ordering from QR codes on the bar table is definitely the blunt end, and the sharp end is now very, very serious. It's what you're explaining here. And so what does, like, for us when we were growing up, because I grew up in like a different generation where we look at World War, and our idea of World War Three is we all put on our tin helmets, we all put on our backpacks, and we get on those little ship things that are going to drop us off in front of machine gun fire, and we toddle up the beach with our gun, and we fight for king and country and etc. and all of that. What does World War Three look like to someone of your generation?
Well, sadly, it's gonna look like what's looking like in Ukraine, where you're in the trenches, and a Russian or a Ukrainian drone comes and he just bombs you, and you die immediately, and you don't even see
You
proper
turn
combat.
into dust. You turn into
Yes,
dust. Some of those
yes,
videos are like it's almost possibly like, oh, I would prefer to go like that. If you're going to be killed, you may as well just be something and then instantly nothing,
yes.
rather than be in pain or not. But it is pretty dire, the situation. So what does that mean? What's the point of putting people in trenches if that's the case?
Well, obviously, you need to. Drones cannot control territory, really. You still need ground troops to control infrastructure and control the border crossings. Troops will still be necessary. It's just that there will be a lot of cases where non-troops are fighting troops.
Mhm. How long till robot troops?
Maybe not that long. I don't know if people are talking about. I think Elon Musk is thinking about personalized like bots.
I don't mean to
Like,
laugh or anything, and I've done a lot of work on Elon Musk, and it always comes down to, and what about this solution where men can have their heads ripped off by robots? Oh yes, oh, Actually, Elon Musk is doing that right now. No, but go on. Sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry.
and well, consider that, but they're thinking of it in terms of like a personal service bot in your house. But you give that bot a gun, and it's not really far from going into the trenches.
100% shot accuracy rating. I mean,
Yeah.
can you imagine what the shot accuracy rating of a World War One soldier would have been like? Musket divisions in the 17th century were probably more accurate than machine gunners in the trenches, by a long way as well. So I mean, the technology is turning into something which is totally fascinating. So the World War, does it then become, is the real front line of the modern warfare and any world war to come, is the front line the technological workshop?
Yeah, for sure. It's whoever has the better technology will win. But this does not really mean so it's a bit complicated because, for example, you see in the conflict between Israel and Lebanon that Israel has far superior technology, but Hezbollah is able to use these types of, I guess, guerrilla tactics where the ground invasion is really costly for Israeli forces. And everyone knows that Israel has the air superiority. They can bomb Lebanon whenever they want. But in terms of a ground invasion, Hezbollah is able to do these innovative, I guess, traps, and they have really good understanding of the territory and the forests. And it's also the case that the launchers they use in order to strike Israel with missiles, they're really mobile as well. They can be deployed in a very short amount of time. You don't have to have like a huge, I guess, launcher that takes hours to deploy. So this also means that non-army, or we could call Hezbollah an army, I guess, but it's not an army. It's not a standing army in the same sense that the IDF is. These technological developments also allow these, I guess, non-state actors to almost have parity with these great forces that Israel definitely does not have a weak army. But in terms of a ground invasion, they're unable to do so, and they're in parity with Hezbollah.
Yeah, we've seen that in previous conflicts. I mean, previous intifadas, you've seen how the Israeli ground forces have been overwhelmed when it comes to guerrilla tactics. Drone technology changes a lot. Indeed, it does, but also there's adaptability, and I I think that the workplace of the technological sort of like the military arms companies, etc. These are going to be the main targets for massive industrial espionage. That's going to be where the real battle is fought, is with a lot of espionage and a lot of these tactics. Do you see that sort of thing happening too?
Yeah, for sure. Military espionage has always been important, and especially for Israel. They'd love
Mhm.
to steal the
They
technology of other countries, I guess. And I'm guessing every other country, if they could, would want to get the technology of other companies. And Israel, of course, next to Turkey, is also very advanced in drone warfare. Their Hermes drones are they're world renowned, and yeah, they've been used in wars against Hamas or Hezbollah. So if Hezbollah could somehow acquire the same level of, I guess, drone technology as Israel, that would be really beneficial for them.
Yeah, now, okay, this leads us nicely on because I mean, we really, I was like, are we gonna, Yeah, we weren't sure about how long it would take to talk about some of these things, but it's clear there's a lot to talk about.
Yes, for sure,
We haven't
for
even
sure.
got to like the main subjects. We're kind of approaching it, and I don't want to endanger you at all. So I will accept that you may need to answer fairly diplomatically, for you are Turkish yourself. What is Israel's relationship with Turkey like? And there's two extra points to probably that question that I have in my mind, which is, what's their military relationship like, and what's their technological transfer relationship like as well?
Well, in terms of, well, until 2023, until October 7th, the relationship between Israel and Turkey was not actually that bad. In my opinion, it's still not that bad, but at least even publicly, it wasn't horrendous. Now there's a lot of public clashes between Israeli officials and Turkish officials. They call each other names, and that's normal. But there was trade between Israel and Turkey, uh, frequent trade between them, and now we've seen that a Turkish shipping company, a Turkish ship called Anadolu S, was hit by the Houthi rebels. Well, at least it wasn't hit, but it was targeted by the Houthi rebels for allegedly doing trade with Israel. So I think people can interpret themselves what that means in terms of the relationship between Turkey and Israel. And if the Houthis are considering the ship to be dangerous, well, I don't think the Houthis are attacking without having some sort of knowledge.
Yeah, yeah. So Turkey is got a possibility, especially being a majority Muslim country, of course. Turkey has a possibility of getting a lot of backlash if it publicly works with Israel. Will that always keep Turkey from being allies with Israel, or is there a different future coming? Will because Israel, there's been a lot of Erdogan's talked a lot about you know in a threatening manner towards Israel, almost like if you don't stop what we're doing, we'll take action. But it all seems to be empty. Nothing ends up in there actually being any action at the end of it. Will that continue? Is that just a front? What's the relationship like?
Well, see, let's look at the big picture. Turkey is a NATO country. It's closely allied with the United States. The United States considers Israel to be their best friend. So even in this, just looking at it surface level, it could possibly not be the case that Turkey could not possibly go to war with Israel or vice versa, in my opinion. It's just Turkey and United States are far too close. But it is, in my opinion, a fact that Israel and Israeli citizens don't really trust Turkey because of the fact that the Turkish population really has sympathy for the Palestinian cause. So they're not a trustworthy ally, and they think that the Turkish population could make Erdogan make decisions where it would not benefit Israel. And well, they are right to think that Turkish Turkey is people refer to it as a dictatorship, but we have elections. Elections are quite close most of the time, and uh, if if in another election, for example, Turkey would get a more Palestinian-friendly president, that would definitely not be good for the Israelis. But I think we'll get into it in a second. But the relationship between the Kurds, Turkey, and Israel is quite interesting in this context.
Yeah, we'll get onto that in a sec. I want to ask first, like you because I mean, most of the Western world view Turkey as some form of dictatorship. Erdogan's been in power for a very long time. There's been a couple of points where there's been jitters, and we weren't sure whether he was going to keep power. What does if there was a power change, if there was some sort of I don't know if it'd be a rising popular movement or whether it be a current political entity. But what are the what's the difference that would most likely happen in Turkey? What would be the political changes after Erdogan?
Well, I'll talk about the international scene because I think that's most relevant here. Internally in Turkey, many things may change, but that's not really quite relevant. What's relevant is that regardless of who becomes president in Turkey, they will, in my opinion, never take an anti-NATO, anti-American stance or anti-Israel stance. Regardless of who is president, they'll always have close relations with NATO. Because how can you have bad relations with NATO if you have multiple NATO bases in your country, where multiple radar stations that they're able to provide intelligence for Iranian missiles. Uh, so in Malatya, there's a radar base, the Kurejik air base, that provides intelligence to Americans whenever Iranians try to shoot missiles against Israel. America can warn them. It connects into the NATO, the THAAD, I guess, security apparatus. So it's not a realistic scenario where Turkey becomes against NATO. And especially the current Minister of Defense, he has said that our relations with Americans are quite good at the moment. And I do believe him. I don't think they're bad. So regardless of who becomes president in Turkey, Turkey will continue to have close relations with the United States.
And what does that mean for the potential of World War with Russia then? Because will is it the same way round down? Will there be any dynamic changed by that that's significant enough to see an anti-NATO or anti-US approach, or will would Turkey, if there was a breakout of a war, would Turkey look to remain a neutral country?
Well, that's a scenario where World War happens is really difficult. I think that Turkey has, since the beginning, has said that they want peace between Russia and Ukraine, which is a lot different than what the other European countries are saying. And they have played a mediating role. And they do help Russia with their. Russia is a lot more dependent on Turkey in terms of economy as well, now that the embargo from the European states. And the relations have gotten closer. Russia needs to accommodate Turkey a lot more. But this does not really mean that Turkey would take a pro-Russian side in a world war against Russia. Turkey is still, in terms of their military, is still a NATO country, and we must never forget that.
Mhm.
If push comes to shove, Turkey will join, in my opinion, against Russia, but they'll try to make sure that, I guess, they're not doing too much to destroy their relations with Russia. But they are still a NATO country, and they will try to at least provide some sort of help uh, for a war against Russia.
And what do you think to Vladimir Putin's threat that anybody who makes the parts of missiles or etc. that's used against Russia inside Russian territory um, will be an enemy of Russia, and that NATO countries are going to be responsible for that? What do you think that has as an effect on Turkey?
Well, Turkey has provided the Bayraktar drones to Ukraine that have been really successful in the conflict. And I think there's a even a street named Bayraktar now, or something like that in Ukraine because they like it so much. It's it's a really it is a world-renowned drone. It's the world's most exported drone.
It's one of a
So
strange reason to name a street, though, isn't
yeah,
it?
it's a strange reason. I don't want to give any false information, but I do believe this is at least
Yeah.
semi-true. Uh, so Turkey has supported Ukraine, but I mean, I guess in international politics, you do have to kind of ignore some stuff. Russia realizes that Turkey is a NATO country, and they have to at least save face and say, well, we are with you, really, but at the same time also have close relations with Russia. So it's a balancing act. So I don't think Russia will want to put Turkey in the crosshairs anytime soon because that's their only way out. That's the only way they can have a mediation with NATO.
Mm.
So Turkey will be a critical ally for Russia,
So critical ally just due to the diplomatic nature of their
for sure,
relationship
and
and the
economic.
dynamic that will play. Yeah, yeah, I can imagine that. And Turkey's amazing at being able to deal with both sides. I mean it's laudable in this world where everything becomes so black and white. That Turkey is able to play this mediator role, but it's complex, isn't it? And it's again all dependent on Turkey remaining relatively stable, which I think it probably is. Now, one of the points, and we're getting on to something that we're going to speak about here as well, a main topic. One of the main points of instability in recent Turkish history has been due to their Kurdish population. And the Kurds are obviously supported commonly by the West as well as some form of, you know, um, counterweight to Turkish dominance in the region, and also useful because the Kurdish territory crosses multiple borders, and so means that Western influence is within those areas too. What is the current situation between Turkey and the Kurds in relationship to diplomacy, etc.? And there has been great shifts in this relationship as of late. Can you tell us a bit about this?
For sure. That's, I think, the really crucial question at the moment that most people are really ignoring in the West, but in Turkey it's a big deal. That in 2015, from 2009 till until 2015, there was a peace process between Kurdish organizations, the PKK, and the Turkish government, where this is also called the Kurdish opening, where they try to give some, I guess, rights and privileges to the Kurdish population in order to create an environment for peace and reduce the amount of terrorist attacks in Turkey. But this process ended in 2015 after the PKK killed two police officers. And since then, the talks have stopped. And during the talks, of course, the leader of the Kurds, Abdullah Öcalan, there were talks with him so that he can talk to the Kurdish population and he can refer to them and tell them to, I guess, calm down and not perform any more attacks. But that was the goal. And Öcalan is the leader of he's the founder and the leader of the PKK. He's still considered by the Kurds to be a great leader. When there's protests, people will shout his name out. He is a still really strong force, but he's been in Turkish captivity for the past 20 years. But he's still an influential leader, but I think he's 70 something years old now. So he's getting there, and we don't know how long he'll live. And recently, a few weeks ago, the leader of the Turkish National Party, the National Action Party, called on Abdullah Öcalan, the leader of the Kurds, to speak in parliament. So this is a quite interesting fact because he's in prison, of course. How could he speak in parliament? And this people thought that maybe they're going to release him to talk to the Kurdish population, and this is the signs of a second Kurdish opening in 2024 after, I guess, how many years? 9 years now that there's going to be relations once again between the Turkish government, the negotiations between the Turkish government and the PKK. And of course, the PKK is mostly in Iraq, in northern Iraq. But we know that in what's actually critical, in my opinion, is northern Syria. The northern Syrian Kurds control a lot of territory in what used to be the Assad regime. Assad now controls a lot less territory than he used to, and the Kurds control two-thirds of the agricultural land as well. They control Deir ez-Zor, which is has a lot of oil. They control the oil fields. So the Syrian Kurds, there must be, if there's going to be a second Kurdish opening, there must be negotiations between what they call Rojava or the Syrian Kurds and the Turkish government as well. This is quite important because Trump, especially, has been known to try to pull out of Syria, and there's American bases in Syria. What happened in 2019, there was a partial pull, and Turkey invaded Syria and they attacked YPG. That is the military branch of the people call it the Syrian Democratic Forces. Turkey calls them YPG, considers them a terrorist organization. Uh, Turkey attacked YPG and they were able to destroy a lot of they were able to kill a lot of personnel. So what's important is Trump in his second term gonna pull out of Syria? He tried to pull out. It was a partial pullout because the generals didn't allow it. They lied to him about how many military personnel was left in Syria. And as I've learned really recently, and we'll talk about it in a minute, the Al Tanf base, which is one of the biggest bases, it's one of the biggest territories controlled by America. That was the only reason, in order to keep Al Tanf, that was the only reason Trump was convinced to not pull out of Syria. And Al Tanf is critical because it is one of the three main supply routes Iran uses in order to reach the Assad regime and Hezbollah.
Mhm.
The main supply routes are, in order, Al Yarubiya, which is in the north, and it is controlled by the Syrian Democratic Forces. So it is closed off to Iran. And if Iran wants to supply military equipment or, I guess, any term, any type of technology to Hezbollah or the Assad regime, they have to use one of three routes. And if people don't know, the main reason Iran is a threat to Israel is not actually because Iran has any it's not because Iran's long-range missiles that they've used last month that they've hit Israel with. That's great, but what's the actual threat is the short-range missiles they're able to provide Hezbollah and Hamas, and they are the proxies that really pose the threat to Israel. And they can only do so through, if you can imagine the map on your in your head, they can only do so through Iraq, and from Iraq there's a border that crosses into Syria, and from Syria is the Assad regime, and from there to Hezbollah.
Yeah.
So there's three main supply routes that they can use in order to do this. The first one I mentioned, the Al Arabiya, Rabia, that's the name of the Iraqi-Syrian border. That's the border crossing. That is closed off to Iran because it's controlled by the Syrian Democratic Forces, the Kurds in Syria. The second one is in the most south, is the base I mentioned, the Al Tanf base. It's controlled by the Americans, so Iranians aren't able to cross this
Mm.
either. There's only one route that Iranians are able to use. It is the Abu Kamal al-Qaim Iraqi-Syrian border, and that is controlled by the Iranians, and they can provide Assad and Hezbollah with weapons. And this was mentioned. This is not a new phenomenon. This was mentioned even in 2000. You can find reports from 2017 that mentions this. But what's quite interesting to me is that while I was reading these reports, I was also following the Kurdish and Israeli conferences that were being made. The Kurdish leaders met up with Israeli leaders in order to talk about how we're going to move forward with an alliance. And one of the speakers was a Israeli British journalist called Jonathan Spire. And Jonathan Spire, he said that it is quite crucial for Trump to not pull out of Syria because if they do, it could possibly be the case that these border crossings would open again, and that Iran right now controls the Abu Kamal border crossing, and that is how they provide weapons to Hezbollah, and it is quite critical for us to have our Kurdish friends with us and prevent the, I guess, crossing of this border by Iran. So that is, if you really need to look at a map to quite understand how the relationship goes, but the Syrian Kurds from their resort, they approach the Abu Kamal border. They're bordering the Assad regime in that village as well. So that is, in my opinion, the critical role of the Kurds. The second critical role would be a PKK affiliate is also in Iran. Kurds are in four countries. They're in Turkey, Iraq, Syria, and Iran. And a PKK affiliate is present in Iran. And especially if they want to fight a war against Iran, creating internal destabilization would make sure that Iran focuses on its internal regime rather than using proxies to fight Israel. And Mahsa Amini, if people remember, I think it was in 2022, she was the lady that was allegedly killed for not wearing a headscarf. She was
Mhm.
a she was of Kurdish origin as well. And
Mm.
Mike Waltz, in his book, I think it was called Hard Truths, he talks about this instance, and he says that he was really unhappy that they weren't able to provide enough support for the Kurds in Iran to create more of a disturbance in the regime, and that he says Mike Waltz, who will become Trump's national security advisor, he says that I wish we had organized support from the government. We could do so much more. They tried to use, he says they tried to use Starlink to provide social media access to these protesters. And then when he met up with the Iranian Kurdish leaders, in the United States. Nobody took him seriously, and he was very upset by that. And considering he's going to be in the new cabinet, we can really expect anti-Iranian American regime, which also means that Trump will probably stay in Syria. And this is quite, this is the critical matter here. Will Trump stay in Syria or not? And all the indications show that he will stay in Syria because the cabinet he chose in 2024, in my opinion, is more of a hawkish cabinet than 2016.
Mhm.
You look
Mhm.
at the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, you look at the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. Pete Hegseth says that he wants to build a third temple
These
in
are
near the,
extremists, man.
yes, for sure.
They're stocking them up with the Ziohawks, and I
Yes.
think, yeah, we it's an amazing, it's amazing time. Do you? I mean, you probably I don't want to make you get Americans angry, but there's going to be a lot of Trump fans who are going to say, but these guys will make America great again. Do you think that they are going to end up just in lots of war?
Yes, for sure. If you look at it's the 2024 Trump campaign was really different than the 2016 campaign. And the 2016, the regime that came after that wasn't even that good. So when you consider that, Trump ran on when he first ran, he ran on the fact that he was going to end foreign wars. He was going to end wars in the Middle East. He criticized the Iraq war. He told Jeb Bush that your brother did not keep us safe. And
You can
so that
clap
was
now.
so
Sorry.
that's what he ran on. And even then, he couldn't pull out of Syria. He ended the Iran nuclear deal. So now that he's running, he ran on a campaign where he talked about Iran a lot. And he said that Iran should really stop messing with Israel, and that there were also reports of allegedly Iranian assassination plots against him. I think it turned out that two two of the three plotters were Israelis.
Mhm.
So the tensions between, considering that the campaign itself really was not non-interventionist. The the presidential, I guess, regime that comes after it, considering the cabinet as well, because Trump is not going to be able to make any decisions. It's his national security advisor that's going to tell him what to do. It's going
Mhm.
to be Tulsi Gabbard, who's going to be the director of national intelligence. She also thinks that the number one threat in her book, she says the number one threat to American security is like Hezbollah terrorist cells. So this woman was also considered to be like a non-interventionist, a critic of like foreign wars. The entire cabinet is filled with these people. And I
Manufactured
think,
antithesis.
yes, for sure.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Tulsi Gabbard, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Elon Musk. They've all got this manufactured antithesis of Hegelian dialectical that's been perfectly formed so that they can pretend to be the opposite when they're actually, as soon as they get power, they're going to do exactly the same thing. Even worse, they'll do even worse. They'll do the opposite of what you'd expect them to have done 10 years ago. And that is just, if we get peace talks and Trump the peacemaker this time, I will happily eat my hat, as we say in the UK. I
So will
will,
I. So will I.
yeah, I will happily eat my hat because we are looking at something that looks like war with Iran, and so in that case, will if that is true, if that's what comes, is a second Trump presidency a continuation of George W. Bush's war on terror?
It seems so, and it's going to be more hawkish on Iran rather than Iraq. And I think all the people really don't want to hear this fact, but it's truly the Trump doubt, I guess the silhouette of Trump running as an anti-establishment candidate was really over in this campaign. The people that supported him, he took millions of dollars from Miriam Adelson, the widow of Sheldon Adelson, and of course these people, Miriam Adelson, the only thing they care about is Israel's security. These
Mhm.
people are Israeli citizens. So, uh, and now today, I think it was Scott Bessent. He became the U.S. Secretary of Treasury, and that guy is he's an apprentice of George Soros. So, so, so what's funny is either they're neocon hawks,
Mhm.
where they want to fight with Iran, or they're just the opposite, which is like a George Soros apprentice, like international type. So I don't know how anyone that voted for Trump could really be content with this. People are acting like it's gonna be a
Mm.
now everything's gonna change. People are really optimistic, but you look who's around him, and the only thing people should be, I guess, more optimistic about, which is not a guarantee, is the war between Russia and Ukraine. It seems like Trump will dial that down because it is known that Democrats are more hawkish on Russia and Republicans are more hawkish on Iran. So I think we may see a shift from Russia, from the conflict in Ukraine towards a conflict in the Middle East.
Is that what the is that what the Democrats, as they come to the end of their power in America, is that what they're trying to prevent? Is that why they're supplying these missiles to Russia? Is it or is this just a deep state play rather than a presidential play?
That's a difficult question. I don't know if Biden, I don't know if Biden cares about anything anymore, but I would say it's part of a deep state play. And well, the interesting thing about the deep state is that, for example, Pete Hegseth, he thinks the now or I guess to be Secretary of Defense, he considers the military to be filled with all these Democrats. And he wants to really empty out the military and fill it with people that he wants to, so that, well, it's in line with I guess, the conservative agenda. So he really wants to change, I guess, the bureaucracy as well. That would indicate that, yeah, the war between America and Russia would be less likely under Trump, even though I don't think it's a guarantee.
It's amazing. There's so much to think about there, and so much. I mean, especially this. It really is such an important region, isn't it? Where you've got this crossover between the powers of Iran, Iraq, Syria, the Kurds in between, of course, uh, with the Iran trying to supply Hezbollah. And it, do you think that there will be any chance that Syrian Iranian relationships will align so much that they will start working together?
Syria and Iran?
Yeah. I know
Y-
it's a hard thing to sort of like imagine, but do you think that their relationship will become much closer towards a point where they are military allies?
Well, I already consider the Assad regime at least military allies with Iran, but what's important is, and this is what in there were national security reports that they were really concerned about the fact that if there was a pullout from Syria by Trump, that the Kurds would start becoming allies with the Assad regime, Russia, and Iran. So and as people know, the Kurds were supported by Americans. The YPG was supported by Americans militarily to fight against ISIS. But if America is no longer there, they might have to form alliances with the people that are going to actually stay there and inhabit the region, which is Iran, Syria, and Russia. So they are really afraid of that, and then they think if that happens, as I said, the Al Arabiya border crossing may reopen, and this would be really dangerous for Israel. But it is quite a difficult task because many Kurds really want Israel's help. They're willing to form alliances with Israel, and they trust America, I guess. Even though they don't really trust America, they find America to be their only way of forming an autonomous region, I guess, in northern Syria. So I find it hard to believe that Kurds will become allies with the Assad regime.
If the so and if Iran was to fight America on Syrian soil, what would that take? How long away would that potential be if there's a war between America and Iran? Would Syria, what I'm trying to say is, would Syria and Iran have to become almost linked militarily to defeat them in the region? Because Syria obviously isn't able to push out the Americans. Um, is there something, what's the moment where that relationship changes?
Well, see, in my opinion, the Syrian army really is not in a position to help Iran in any type of war. And even in Syria, in the Syrian civil war, it was actually Hezbollah personnel that really was able to fight the anti-Assad forces. And Iran, they have their own personnel in Syria as well. But what they also have are what people call the proxies. But for example, the People's Mobilization Forces like the Kataib Hezbollah, the Hezbollah from Iraq, not Lebanon, which are armed by Iran. And if there were ever to be a conflict, I guess it would be between American forces and Hezbollah forces plus the Iranian proxies. But I don't know if that's really likely. I don't know if I see that as a likely scenario.
So you don't see all-out war in that region.
Uh, so I'd like to be optimistic, and
Yeah,
and
okay, all out war isn't very
and
optimistic, but
I
World
think
War
the
Three,
more.
I'm wondering what that looks like. And this map looks a little bit like there's a couple of allies that will get closer and closer as the crunch comes in. And the war on terror, George W. Bush's war on terror was the axis of evil, this
Yes.
Iraq, Syria, Iran thing. And that it seems to be now we're coming to the end. We've had Iraq, we've had Syria, we're coming to the next stage. But this is during a time where there's great instability between um, Russia and the West, which may change the dynamics, may change how much of a war we see. But I'm just very interested to see when's the point when it becomes all out war on the ground. And can that ever be again? Or will that just be a case of lots of drone technology being made to make it impossible to have a standard war of the past? Do you see any situation, if you would not be so positive, Khan,
Hmm. Yes.
and you were to look at the
I'll be
negative,
pessimistic for a second.
what what do you think that there could be all out war?
Well, I think the more likely scenario, I guess, I don't know if military, yes, experts would agree with me, but Israel is really an expert in performing assassinations. That's what they did. That was their strategy against Hamas and Hezbollah. It was the decapitation strategy where they would kill the leaders of this organization. Hassan Nasrallah was killed a few months ago. The guy that replaced him was killed. The guy that replaced him was again killed. So their strategy is really decapitation. And uh, just around that time, Netanyahu also released a video about Iran and how we're going to have regime change in Iran and Iran will be more prosperous again. So a more likely scenario would be an internal, I guess, internal destabilization of the Iranian regime or an assassination of the top leaders. The same way that General Qasem Soleimani was killed by an American drone. He was a very high-level leader. He was quite crucial for the Iranian army. I could not say that I don't see that happening in the even higher ups of the Iranian regime, considering Israel, that's what their specialty is. And a second scenario, I guess a related scenario would be the same way the Masha Amini protest happened in 2022. A similar protest might erupt based on, provided with the help of the United States, the Kurds in Iran, and that may be a more likely scenario rather than because how would the United States even fight Iran? They don't
Mhm.
have they don't really have bases that would be able to fight a ground war against Iran. They would be open targets if they started to.
Cyprus.
Well, I guess,
That's as
yeah,
close as you can get, and you get in trouble with the Turks
yeah, well,
and the
exactly.
Greeks.
And in, I guess in Syria, they have bases in Syria, but the second they start to build up forces in the Middle East, they'll be open targets against Iran. So, it's a difficult task, and it will be much harder than an Iraqi invasion, in my opinion, because Iran is not really I guess, a paper tiger.
Yeah. They're not a paper tiger. So is this all still a process of a battle for the Middle East that's been waging since the end of World War II? Is this just the same game of West trying to stop Eastern influence and East trying to stop Western influence? And is this really, if we leave the war front of Ukraine, Russia, will all of that just go down towards Syria and Iran and etc.?
Could be. So there's a few ways to look at this. If the United States ends the war in Ukraine, that means they have more focus and more resources to allocate to the war in the Middle East. But that also means that Russia has more resources to allocate to Syria. And Israel has performed many attacks against Syria, but they've really increased in the past couple of weeks. So if and Russia considers Syria to be a really close ally. Iran is not an enemy either, but the relationship between Syria and Russia is a lot closer. So this could also mean that if it escalates in the Middle East, Russia, now that they've considered Ukraine conquered, I guess, they will be able to allocate more resources to Syria and the war in the Middle East.
Mm, that's amazing that we're still going through this sort of wow, this sort of like world affairs that has been happening for donkey's years. Donkey's years again, I'm using a British term. We're seeing the same situation continue, but it kind of like moves about the board a little bit, and the front line is everywhere from the Baltic states all the way down to where we're talking about now and the Middle East. So, what is your vision of the future if you're an optimist then, Khan? Come on, t tell me something good. What do you think could be a good outcome out of all of this? Could Trump come in and be if he was the peacemaker, if he was, what would he do to get peace?
Well, okay, let's look at it from the bright side. I think I'm more optimistic, definitely, about Russia and Ukraine under Trump as opposed to Biden. And I'd consider it like 51% to 49%, maybe even more, 60 to 40, that Trump does end the war in Ukraine. That's a positive development. That just means one side of the World War III equation that's gone. So that's a positive development. Another positive development is I don't think Israel is able to invade Lebanon anytime soon. They've incurred a lot of casualties, and I think they've bitten more than they can chew. So that I don't think is gonna happen either. In terms of just more sanctions on Iran, making sure that, well, let's consider also the fact that when you put sanctions on Iran because of their nuclear capabilities, this has drawn Iran a lot closer to China. China now buys a lot of most of Iranian oil is bought by China because the other states cannot.
Hmm.
So in that sense, I'd love to be optimistic about the relationship between Iran and United States, but there is definitely no indicator that shows that. If Trump, the only scenario would be, which is, I put it at 1%, I guess, that Trump wills it enough to say to his generals and his national security advisors, I have the people expect me to draw from Syria. This is what I have to do. And I don't care how many troops you want to keep there, pull all of them out. And if he wills this, but sadly, now that he's really old now as well. I don't think people realize this, but in 2016 he had a lot more energy to
Oh
him
yeah.
than
Oh
now.
yeah.
And of course, 4 years of presidency, that does drain your energy. So I don't think he wants to really fight the state anymore. People say it's quite funny because the deep state people that come into power say, now we've drained the swamp, we've drained the deep state. But we're talking about you. You're the people that we're talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I find that fascinating. Watching American politics is always fascinating. It is very much a TV production of the highest quality, there to sway you backwards and forwards and constantly distract you from the deep state, which is what all of these guys are doing that for. And so it is very much a symbiotic relationship. The deep state and government work in alignment. And if government threatens the deep state, then, well, we know what happened to people like JFK, they end up in a bad way, you could say.
yes,
Extremely
for sure.
bad way. So I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. I don't think that there's any chance that what, from your opinion as a young Turkish man who's making his way in the world, got a good general grasp of history, political leanings of where the world is at the moment. What is your view on a Trump administration in America going forward? What does that look like to you?
Well, from a Turkish perspective, I'd say regardless of who's the United States president, Turkey should try to be good allies with whoever is the US president and also whoever is in the region. We can't really say we're allies with the United States by also ignoring forces like Russia, Syria, and Iran. And what's quite interesting is this is something that has occurred every 3, 4 months for the past, I guess, 2 years, that maybe a little bit less than 2 years, but the Turkish regime has expressed its desire to normalize relations with the Assad regime. And this was also noted down in the Astana summit that was a few weeks ago. And this is really interesting that Turkey wants to normalize relations with Assad, but the Ministry of Defense said that it's obviously pulling out of Syria is not in the cards, and Assad has not taken this proposal seriously because he wants Turkey out of it. There's soil. He considers Turkey invade to be an invasive army, and he says unless you pull out, we're not going to sit at the table. And the Ministry of Defense says, well, pulling out is really not in the cards. We want Assad to agree to a new constitution and a new Syria. And he also says that the Free Syrian Army or the Syrian National Army, as it is called today, will become the new Syrian military once there's a new, I guess, a new Syria. In the new Syria, the Turkish-backed Syrian rebels will be forming the Syrian army. So I hope to see a normalization between the Assad regime and Turkey. That would also mean the millions of refugees that are in Turkey, around people say different numbers, 4 to 5 million Syrian refugees in Turkey. They will be also able to return to Syria to their homes. And Assad has made calls to the refugees saying that I will accept you, and there will be no criminal prosecutions against you if you just return now. So I'd like to see that happen. And yeah, I think that's Turkey. Syria is a close natural ally of Turkey, in my opinion. We border them. We should have good relations with them, and hopefully in the future we will.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it's going to be, it's always going to be hard because at the end of the day, there's going to be the Americans trying to destabilize the region. What do you think the Trump, what do you think of Trump and his administration? Where do you think they're going to do with America?
Well, there's the internal politics and there's the external politics, the foreign politics. Foreign politics, I guess it's gonna, as I said, it's gonna be really hawkish against specifically against the Iranian regime. Internal politics, the border is a big issue, but as I said, compared to 2016, he didn't run on the border. The wall was not mentioned once. There's no wall in the southern border of America now. I guess there's a fence, people call it, but people were asking for an actual wall that would
Mm.
prevent illegals. There's talks of mass deportations, but people are already, I think it was Rand Paul that was kind of walking it back even before the regime change happened, even
Oh,
before
nice noticing. Yeah,
January.
yeah.
And they were saying that, well, I guess the illegal immigrants that are violent criminals, they would be the ones that are being deported. And my prediction is that definitely they will be deporting these, I guess, violent criminals that are also illegal immigrants, and they'll call this mass deportations and say, yeah, we've done it, we've succeeded in, I guess, reducing immigration. But of course, this is just a way to save face. The southern border is wide open, and it doesn't seem like the Trump administration really cares about reducing the crossings from the southern border.
Yeah, there's something I'm putting out today that's probably about just gone out. Is about just how I've noticed Elon Musk and Riley Gaines and other people who were talking on the Trump campaign are now pushing towards this idea that immigration, it's the problem is illegal immigration. So if you make immigration illegal immigration easier to gain, then we wouldn't have a problem. And
Yes,
that's
I did see that
just,
as well.
yeah, that's just, yeah, so you're saying economic migration is what Trump's policy, that what the people behind the campaign want, or deeply involved in the campaign want, is economic migration legal, so that instead of them climbing over the fences, they just come in and get their passport stamped easier. And
Yeah, well, exactly. It's just a
wow.
renaming process,
Yeah, well, that's the way it
relabeling.
goes. Yeah, that's a load. We talked about a load very quickly there about stuff as well. I didn't really know much about that region is a bit of a mystery. There's so factional, of course, because you've got the Kurds, you've got the Iranians who, naturally or historically they're Persians. They're very they speak their own language, they have their own culture, they majority of a different background of Muslim faith as well. There's so many differences with Iran than the rest of the region. They've had such a hard time actually, keeping peace, because all around Iran it's been war constantly, really, perpetual war. And we're coming to the big point, and the big point may have always been Iran. So it's amazing to talk about this stuff. It's stuff I don't really know about. Where can people find your work? What are you writing? What are you doing at the moment?
Well, they can find my work on my Twitter and on my Substack. I do tweet in Turkish most of the time, but you can find some tweets in English as well. And you can also read my Substack. I do post about various different subjects, from, I guess, cryptography to the Syrian civil war to economics. So if you're interested in any of these topics, you can find me on my Substack, Kaan.Disli. And if you can also find the link to that on my Twitter as well.
Yeah. Which direction are you going to go then? Are you going to keep writing, keep researching? Can you see a way out? Are you stuck with this now? Is this what you want to do?
We'll see, we'll see, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, you're a talented boy, that's for sure. Kaan Disli, thank you so much for coming on the NEWSPASTE podcast. Really appreciate having you on. It's always a pleasure. We got to do something again, article-wise soon. I know we promised ourselves we'd get round to the Nahum Goldman piece, which I think is so important to understanding like a certain branch of Zionism that was, a massive foundational force of what we've currently got as Israel. It's such a an interesting story as well. So I'd love to get on with that sometime soon. Thanks for coming on the podcast, my friend. Thank you.
Thanks for having me once again.
Pleasure.
Shaping a great reset for the post-corona era.